welcome to Thoughts on Tuesday. So we're back to chapter 7, which is all about your inner captain, or I also refer to it as your inner coach. So one of the things I've noticed, particularly with my clients, is you can do all the deep change work you like, so as much havening, as much EFT as you like, but actually if you don't keep this in check, you can self-sabotage. So in this chapter, one of the things I look at is how our thinking affects our biology. So if you've ever come across Bruce Lipton's work, his book is called The Biology of Belief. He explains how what we think up here affects what goes on in here. And there's so much out there, isn't there, regarding neuroscience and studies and research that demonstrate that actually what we think affects the chemicals that rush around our body. And one of the quotes I like is toxic thoughts equals toxic chemicals. So how do we kind of reverse that? What are the techniques we can use to make sure that our thoughts aren't toxic? So in this vlog, I'm going to focus on your inner captain's voice. So I remember years ago I was running a training session and we were talking about the impact of our inner dialogue and how it influences the results that we get. I was running a stress management course and the delegates were sharing some of their toxic thoughts, things that result in negative outcomes for them. And I remember one gentleman saying that he says to himself when things were really starting to go wrong, excuse my French, he would say, oh shit. And he would say it in that type of tonality. Anyway, years ago I used to do phobia cures and I remember working with one particular lady and she got over a spider phobia because I started to use a different tonality and we created a voice, a cartoon-like voice for the spider. And all of a sudden, because the tonality changed inside, the way she was talking to herself about the spider, her fear changed. Again, in the book, one of the things I talk about are the many voices of your inner captain. And sometimes, I'll be honest, first thing in the morning, I need to give myself a bit of a talking to, you know, as I'm going through all of the different things that I've got going on during the day. So I have a number of characters that I wheel out to manage my inner captain. The first one is MrsWhiplash. She's my no-nonsense character. She is the one that gives me a good talking to and tells me to kind of pull myself together and will say things like, come on, stop having those thoughts, stop moaning, get on with it. And I think sometimes we do need taking into hand. And I know there's a lot of stuff out there about how we need to be compassionate with ourselves. And I absolutely agree. There are times when we need to be compassionate and equally, I think there are times when we need to bring ourselves into hand. So that's when MrsWhiplash comes out. I also have Mrs. Cheerleader. So that's when, take for example, if I'm going off to an event and there's a bit of apprehension and it might be a new training seminar that I'm running, but also it might be that I need a bit of compassion. And so her tonality is something along the lines of, come on, you can do it, you've got this, you're well rehearsed, you're good at what you do. So it's very kind of calming, stoic type thoughts. The final character I use is my Janet Street Porter character. And the purpose of that character is to take the mickey out of myself, because one of the things, again, I've found with my clients, I've found personally, is that sometimes we take ourselves far too seriously. And you know, when we screw up, because everybody screws up, being able to take the mickey out of yourself is really helpful. But you can only do that if you've got good self-esteem. So if you are embracing all your talents and strengths, as I've mentioned in previous chapters, but also you're quite comfortable with your weaknesses. And Janet Street Porter helps me to do that. Sorry, crap accents. Anyway, back to, so the difference with all of those, so each of those three characters, they have different jobs, but they also have different tonality, and it's the tonality that makes the difference in terms of how it makes me feel. So back to the guy who, when he was having a hard time, he would say, oh shit. So he said, right, okay, so what you're saying to me is I've got to change the way that I talk to myself, you know, the voice tone. And I said, yeah, give it a go. And anyway, so he changed it and he demonstrated how he was going to talk to himself differently. And he said, so what I'm going to say is, oh shit. And it made him laugh. And their point being that if we take charge of our captain, if we change our tonality, the way we talk to ourselves, or we use these characters to help us along the way, our thinking can become more helpful rather than hindering. So to close for today, raise awareness and then decide what characters you need to have in your head and what are going to be the helpful thoughts or things that they're going to say to you. Anyway, take care and I'll see you next week.